In the Middle East, Israel has been levelling thousands of civilian buildings in Gaza in controlled explosions. The demolitions across the Gaza Strip have ramped up since the ceasefire ended in March, particularly in Rafah, a city in the south of Gaza. BBC Verify's Merlin Thomas has this report.
21 months of war has ravaged Gaza. Homes, streets, parks, once bustling with life, now in ruins. Since the ceasefire ended, demolitions by Israeli forces and contractors have ramped up, levelling large swathes of Rafah. This was Tel al-Sultan, one of Rafah City's most vibrant neighbourhoods, in May. Weeks later, Israeli demolition has levelled it, with only the maternity hospital left standing. Israeli Defence Minister Israel Katz announced plans to create a so-called humanitarian city here for 2 million Palestinians to live in. It's been widely condemned and compared to a concentration camp by a former Israeli Prime Minister, Ehud Olmert. Controlled explosions, excavators and bulldozers have obliterated whole areas of the remnants of the once bustling region. BBC Verify identified footage of infrastructure being demolished in 40 locations since the ceasefire ended in March. Tower blocks, schools and civilian buildings reduced to rubble. BBC Verify also identified dozens of ads posted on Israeli Facebook groups offering demolition work in Gaza to contractors, offering special projects in excellent conditions in areas controlled by the IDF.
The Israeli army says it operates in accordance with international law, that Hamas concealed military assets in civilian areas, and that property destruction is only when deemed a military necessity. But legal experts say these demolitions may violate international law.
Destroying enemy property in an occupied territory without imperative military necessity is a war crime. The expectation that Hamas may return to a neighborhood would not meet the standard of imperative military necessity. It is too speculative. And when entire neighborhoods get leveled, this simply raises the suspicion that the standard used here for deciding what is necessary or militarily useful is lower than what the law demands.
When the long-awaited ceasefire comes, for those who return, only ruins and the memory of what once was will remain. Merlin Thomas, BBC News.
Well, with me here in the studio is the BBC's international editor, Jeremy Bowen, and Merlin touched upon it, but tell me a little more about what Israel is saying in terms of justification for doing this.
Well, they say everything that they're doing in Gaza, they justify in the interests of the security of their state, protecting their civilian population, and eradicating Hamas as not just a governing organization, but a military organization. The Israelis argue that Hamas fight from among the civilian population, so I suppose their extrapolation of that is that if you remove those civilian settlements, then how can they use that as protection? Against that is the question is, as was said there by the Oxford academic who's an expert in international law, is this proportionate to the risk, the threat that Hamas still poses to the Israelis? What are the military justifications for doing this? Wanton destruction is a war crime. The eradication of these civilian homes also plays into those people who are amassing evidence saying that Israel is committing war crimes there, up to and including potentially, they say, genocide. And one of the arguments behind that is that people say is that if you make Gaza uninhabitable, then that pushes towards that case, which is going on at the moment, slowly and over a period of years, at the International Court of Justice in The Hague.
Now, all of these things, when you look at the humanitarian situation on the ground and, of course, aid, everyone keeps pointing to the ceasefire and the talks that are going on. Where are we with all of that?
Well, what I can deduce, and these things are going on with, what's going on, the Israelis and Hamas don't sit down together. There are mediators. The mediators are the Americans, and Steve Witkoff, Trump's envoy, is very important in all of this. The Qataris, the venue is Doha usually, and the Egyptians. Now, I think there has been some progress, reports suggest, and also diplomatic sources have told me that there are still some sticking points. One of them is about the degree to which, during a ceasefire, Israeli forces, the IDF, would pull back out of Gaza. But there are some things which appear not any longer to be an obstacle, and one of that is the idea that if there was a ceasefire, humanitarian aid would not just be functioned through this, many people would say discredited now, Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, whose operations have resulted directly in the deaths of hundreds of Palestinian civilians in brutal circumstances. And that instead the UN would once again be able to start reviving its network there. We'll see what's happened. I think the experience of looking at possible ceasefires in Gaza over the last couple of years is do not believe they're happening until you see them happening.
Yes, and Hamas, even in the last half an hour, was talking about, and again, it's one of the areas that has been so problematic, where it's a temporary truce or a permanent end, and they're making the point that they will only release the hostages if it was a permanent end to the conflict.
They've been saying for quite some time they will release all the hostages if there's a guaranteed permanent end to the Gaza war and the Israelis pull out. The Israelis have been saying for an equal length of time they reserve the right to go back to war, which is what they did on 18th of March when they blew up in smithereens the last ceasefire.
Jeremy, you are here with me. So there is just a line of news that the AFP news agency is reporting concerning Syria, and we were talking about Syria on this programme with you only yesterday. The UN saying nearly 800,000 people have been displaced by the violence in South Syria. I know there's talk of a ceasefire at the moment, but how dangerous is this situation?
Well, it's super dangerous for anybody who believes that a Syria that is not stable and peaceful is anything other than a danger to the region. The Israelis have said to the government of President Asharah that there should be no military operations south of Damascus, essentially creating a sort of Israeli protectorate there. They have now said that for 48 hours they can send in troops from Damascus to try to restore order as long as they protect the Druze areas. Thing has been going on. There's loads of absolutely horrendous video coming out there today. I've seen pictures of purporting to show Druze fighters driving around with dead bodies of Bedouins, tied to the bonnets as women ululate in, triumph and happiness, and at the same time Bedouin tribes people torching Druze property, and there are reports as well of tribal militias mobilizing to go in and hit the Druze. So it's not looking very good, and frankly, a Syria that is in chaos is bad news for the region.
Jeremy, thank you for taking us through all of that. Jeremy Bowen, our international editor.